Today, we have Dr. Loftin Woodiel, dynamic university professor, criminal justice professional, and corporate security executive with a successful track record of performing with excellence. A retired professor in criminal justice and corporate security, leadership graduate programs. Dr. Woodiel is a nationally recognized researcher and communicator with the demonstrated ability to achieve global understanding and compliance through quality discovery and presentation. Woody is a USAF veteran. Lori. Oh, and Randy. So we got two Air Force folks here. Doris?
My husband.
Okay. USAF veteran who excelled in 3 leadership tiers as an innovative, results-driven law enforcement and security professional. As an upfront international security executive, Dr. Woodiel possesses the business acumen and influence and drive change. So, without further ado, Dr. Woodiel will tell us about William Quantrill.
Golly, Mr. Gifford, those are some big words. I don't know if I can live up to them. I appreciate that. Hey, for those of you who haven't noticed, I'm back here, and this is, if you're looking forward, this is my best side. So I just wanted to let you know in advance. Thank you so much for being here this evening. It's a pleasure to be here with the St. Louis Civil War Roundtable. Thank you to Doug for making this possibility come to fruition. I am indeed humbled by the invitation. William C. Quantrill. I bet you know some things already. We often enter historical presentations with perceived notions of expectations. We know what our 4th grade teacher told us. We know what our middle school teacher told us, what our high school teacher told us, and then what everything else that we gossiped about him and tried to put together on our own. Some of you probably have been to various locations where Mr. Quantrill visited. He is not wanted back at most of those locations, just to let you know. But tonight, I challenge you in the way that we're going to learn this evening is to put on a different lens. I'm going to ask you to come to some of my roots, and that is criminological theory. On the paper that you have are 9 criminal theory points. They were put together by Edwin Sutherland in the 1930s and revised throughout. Let me get back on script. Here we go. In our discussion this evening, William C. Quantrill, the father of post-Civil War Missouri Banditry, we ask whether experiences or teaching provided to and by Quantrill during the American Civil War had a part to play in propelling some of his subordinates into deviant careers once the war is over. I've got an amen on the left-hand side. We begin with a simple central proposition here, ladies and gentlemen, and that's this. Everything we have experienced in our lives and that we do shapes the lives of those who come after us. Everything that we do, everything that we say, sticks with someone that is growing into fruition, just the same way it stuck with you as you were growing into fruition and into your elementary and high school and adult lives. Environmentally, our values, cultures, and experiences all form who we are and become. In these cases, who we are is a product of those who came before us. In fact, our experiences and what we are creating right now is already shaping others for the next day. No one comes into this world meant toward antisocial behavior or illegal behavior. No one comes in and says, I'm going to be a criminal on day 1. Somewhere along the way, you have been, someone has shared, invited, nurtured, discipled you into acceptance of your own personal environment, just as others who came before us. Prior to the American Civil War, William Quantrill was a school teacher in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Kansas, and was a part of the Western expansion in additional roles. Several of Quantrill's men continued to hone their guerrilla skill sets, maintain these deviant careers and behaviors, and channeled them into post-career opportunities, post-war opportunities. Just as a teacher motivates his students to adopt specific standards of academic and social behavior, did Quantrill's pedagogical skill set propel his subordinates into this criminal career? And if he did, was it in whole or was it in part of whatever he shared with them? Each time we present William C. Quantrill, the father of post-Civil War banditry, we pair it with a measurement with different criminological theories to gain a 360 view, an understanding of the historical actors and events. In the past, we've done anomy theory, subculture theory, labeling, critical conflict, to see how Quantrill measured up in those areas. What I'm asking you to do this evening is take a look at Edwin Sutherland's theory of differential association. And as we look at each one of the 9 lines of that theory, if you hear something this evening that we talk about during the historical segment that fills or falls in to one of those 9 areas, make a little note to yourself. Yes, this was Quantrill. No, this was his parents. This was his peers. And it caused this. Don't have to make a mission to Moscow. Just very simply a note that will remind you when we get to the end and look, because I will want to hear your thoughts off of your worksheets. If you would like to leave your completed worksheet with us at the conclusion of the evening, it would be a blessing to read those. If you want to take it with you, you are so welcome to do that. Let's take a look at the 9 points. Criminal behavior is learned. I think we're pretty safe on that one all the way around. Criminal behavior is learned in interaction with other persons in the process of communication. That can be oral communication, physical communication, etc. The principal parts of the learning of criminal behavior occurs within intimate groups. I can buy into this fairly quickly. We don't hire conventions to talk about how to be criminal. We do it on the slide. The 4th element, when criminal behavior is learned, the learning elements are techniques of committing the crime, which are sometimes very complicated, sometimes very simple, and the specific direction, motives, drives, rationalizations, and attitudes. Additionally, the last 5. The specific direction of motives and drives is learned from the legal codes as either favorable or unfavorable. This legal code is favorable. I appreciate it. Therefore, I'm going to obey it. I think this legal law is full of it. I'm not going to obey it. The second one on your screen. A person becomes delinquent because of the excess of definitions favorable to violations of the law over definitions of unfavorable. Differential associations may vary in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. That is, it may come at you at different times, different places, in different ways. The process of learning criminal behavior is associated with criminal and anti-criminal patterns. involves all the mechanisms that are involved in everything else that you learn. Becoming a criminal is as simple as becoming an upstanding citizen. And last, although criminal behavior is an expression of general needs and values, it is not explained by the general needs and values because non-criminal behavior is an expression of the same needs and values. I gotta eat, so therefore I go to work. I've gotta eat, so I've gotta go over and not go over to the grocery store. The same thoughts and elements. So, was Quantrill really totally responsible for the guys that came after him? In part or in whole? Is it just a slice of the apple or is it the entire apple? I look at three different areas: individuals, organizations, and society. Individuals. Could it be William Quantrill's own decision what he did? Could his parents have influenced it? Well, could it have been other relatives? How about the school, his school chums? There's always a bully somewhere in the group. His work associates? Perhaps it's an organization like the Confederacy, the Army, the Guerrilla organization, bushwhackers, or on the other side of the spectrum, the Union Army, Jayhawkers. Maybe even the Delaware Indians had influence here. Or was it as a result of societal movement? Societal movement as a result of the American Civil War? Or the westward movement in America? The Gold Rush? Or very simply, the times they are a-changing. In our historical journey together tonight, we will divide the material between Quantrill's early years and his Civil War years. And I must admit, as I was looking at my notes today, I spend a little bit more time in his early years. I don't know why, but it just drew me there as I was beginning to look at the material. By the time we reach the end of our discussion tonight, I believe, using the tools given you along with the oral presentation, you will be academically walking down one of the several paths of placing culpability as to why some guerrillas in Quantrill's command channeled their skill sets. We look forward to hearing your understanding at the end. So I'm going to ask you this. I'll be asking for your input, excuse me, at the end of the historical presentation. If you would be so kind, hold your questions until that point, and we can have a good old-fashioned Donnybrook at that point. So it will work well. Challenges. The material we look at tonight is difficult to find in some cases. In search of primary evidence for analysis, we are dependent upon letters from Quantrill to his mother and secondary evidence comprised of interviews conducted by partisan and nonpartisan story gatherers, historians, and biographers during and just after the American Civil War. Newspaper interviews and journalistic reports of the day were evident of partisan thoughts and interpretation, usually guided by state boundaries. Big surprise, especially in the turbulence of the border and national tensions. These are the times of extreme cruelty of thought and action, and inability to see the opponent's perspective in language and in battle. Sounds a little bit like 2026 at some points. No one wants to understand the other person's side. They just want to get it done and get it over with. We must be alert also to manifest and latent facts and vetting. And that is really where we get going. I'm sorry, I'm drinking back here tonight. Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew. You have not already driven me to drink. So, William Quantrill's life began in a quiet town of Canal Dover on July 31st, 144 years before I was born on July 31st, 1837. Quantrill's father was Thomas Henry, a tinsmith, who later became a teacher and later became the principal of Canal Dover School. His mother was Caroline Cornelia Clark. She and her husband were natives of Hagerstown, Maryland, but moved to Canal Dover after their marriage in 1836. They had 7 children. 4 of them died in infancy. However, William himself, a sister, Mary, 1 year younger than William, that had curvature of the spine and passed away in 1863, and 2 brothers, Thomas and Franklin, who survived William and who survived the notoriety, whether it be justified or unjustified, that it gave the family. Can you imagine walking down after the American Civil War down the streets of Canal Dover? Somebody points out and goes, "Oh, there's Thomas Quantrill," and you hear the group. It was a leading place indeed. While we no longer believe in the heredity transfer of character traits, we accept that an environment of antisocial behavior may be experienced and its impact passed on and adopted during the formative years. Impact coming in from the form of rumor, gossip, and/or fact that affects the reputation of a family. For instance, allow me to introduce you to a couple of Quantrill's favorite relatives. I bring you number 1, great uncle Thomas Quantrill. Achieved a certain fame as a pirate along the Louisiana-Texas coast during the rollicking days of Jean Lafitte. His father's brother, Jesse, led a long and eventful career in and out of prisons as a forger, a confidence man, and a 6-time bigamist. Wow. There is always an overachiever somewhere. Even his father himself, the principal, once embezzled school funds in order to pay for the printing of a booklet on tinsmithing, which he had written. When the member of the school board exposed the fraud, the senior Quantrill endeavored to unsuccessfully assassinate the school board member. Outside of this, hey, the Quantrill clan was absolutely a normal, decent, humdrum type of family. And despite the theft and assassination attempt, the father retained his respectable standing in the community and his job as principal. I gotta think that the man could talk, that he could convince. Only meager records exist about William Quantrill's early days as a child. He supposedly, according to light details, enjoyed shooting pigs through the ears, nailing stakes to trees, stabbing horses and cows. His favorite pastime was wandering through the woods along shooting small game. He was described as having a few friends, but no close ones. Now, let me just tell you this. When you start looking this early at someone's criminal behavior or shocking behavior, such accounts should be received with skepticism, as in the case of men who achieve fame. The events of later life are reflected back on their early years. No doubt deeds which on the part of any other youth would have been completely forgotten. How many of you have ever Shot a gun in the woods. Shot an animal. Had a dislike for snakes. Amen, brother. You're doing well. Now, I'm not going to say stabbing horses and cows. I'll go easy on you. How many of you ever tipped a cow? Oh, thank you, sir. Honesty in the back row here. But you can see how one can take that type of information and spin it. Let me give you a more modern day example. Ted Bundy, 30 plus rapes and murders. An awful guy. Now, what if I were to say, oh, I had some information about him. I knew him as a child, and I understand he liked to date. Now, you put he liked to date with everything else, you've got yourself a big rumor going on. But was that the case here? We don't know. I present it because it was information available and documented. Let's face it, when people came in to do studies on Quantrill after the American Civil War, the inhabitants of Canal Dover were not exactly bursting with pride to go, yeah, Bill was here quite a bit. No, he used to hang out in my general store. Well, what does that say about you? All of a sudden. Quantrill, however, by records, actual records, ladies and gentlemen, was a superior student academically and acquired better than average education for his time and age. At the age of 16, he ceased to be a pupil and became a teacher at the Canal Dover School. In 1854, his father died of consumption. The family now found themselves in dire circumstances. Mrs. Quantrill took in boarders. Sister Mary did sewing for others. And Quantrill continued teaching. There are many indications that he bitterly resented his home being turned into a boarding house and the resultant loss of his social status. So he gets on his horse and rides. Go west, young man, was the common slogan of the American Western expansion. Quantrill most likely believed that he could surely make his fortune out west. After all, that's what everybody was saying you could do. But his burden was now in supporting his family. In the summer of 1855, Quantrill left Canal Dover with some friends and went to Mendota, Illinois. Sole job he could secure, teaching. Teaching students and boarding in the parents' homes. He supplemented his income. I give him credit here. His ingenuity came out. He supplemented his income by selling copies of his father's tract on tinsmithing. Yes, this is the same one his father embezzled the money to print and attempted to kill the fact finder. Beside that, he loved duck hunting and geese hunting. He was unable to send any money home. By November of the next year, he regretted even leaving. He wrote his mom and said, "Mom, I am going to turn over a new leaf entirely. This will be the last winter that you will ever have to keep boarders." There seems to be some type of weight or responsibility here. He failed to carry out even these intentions. By January, he was working in a lumber yard. And once again, rumor raises its ugly little head. It is rumor, unsubstantiated historical rumor, places that at that time, at 18 years old, he shot and killed a man who attempted to rob him at the lumber yard. True? False? But oh, it can build the whispers and gossip that goes on. In spring of 1856, Quantrill headed back stopping in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where he acquired another teaching position, this time for $20 a month plus room and board, and he had 35 to 40 students in his classroom. He wrote his mom with some good news. He said, "Mom, they've told me, the community, that I am the best teacher they ever had." At least that's what he believes at this point in the process. By fall of '56, he returned to Canal Dover and a teaching position in the country in the South. His mother still took in boarders. His sister continued to sew other people's clothes, and they all remained poor. Failure to advance themselves and the family must have weighed heavy on him. But don't get despair yet. One of his friends, his schoolmate, Richard Beeson, shared an adventure with him. Richard's father, Harmon, and Colonel Torrey were heading west to Kansas in pursuit of fortune. Quantrill's mother requested that he be allowed to accompany. Perhaps Quantrill might acquire a farm that the family could settle on, and life could begin anew. The Beesons and Quantrill left in '57 for Kansas. They got there, and when they arrived, Mr. Beeson purchased claims and an additional claim for Quantrill in his name. Quantrill received $60 for holding the claim for Beeson and Torrey. Quantrill lived with the Torreys and the Beesons, and they occupied the same cabin. They rolled the same logs. They cleared the same land. They planted corn. They hunted together. At a certain point, Quantrill felt that Beeson and Torrey had not paid him enough for holding this land. So he took them to squatter's court, where Quantrill was awarded $63. But Torrey and Beeson, they didn't pay Quantrill. They felt that he was ungrateful because they'd carried him so far, transportation, room, board. But Quantrill became impatient in this, and in waiting for the payment. So he stole a yoke of oxen from Beeson, a blanket, and 2 pistols from Torrey in an attempt to force them to pay. After being threatened at gunpoint, Quantrill returned all of them except the blanket that remained to rot in a hollow log. At least half of the money, but not all. Strangely enough, despite these actions of all the parties, it is recorded that they remained on good terms. I just don't understand this place. You can attempt to kill someone and they forgive you quickly. The summer, Beeson returned to Canal Dover to bring his family and Torrey's family out. A whole group of people from Canal Dover came out, and they founded an area called Tuscarora Lake after their home county. Many schoolmates of Quantrill asked him to join the settlement. "Come on over, Bill." After a short period of time, blankets, provisions, clothing, and other articles were stolen from the Tuscarora settlement. Quantrill prominently pointed out the culprits were from that other settlement. However, his accusation moved suspicion on him. Ultimately, Quantrill was caught in the act and evidently fencing the goods to the other settlement. Quantrill was ordered to leave. So he headed out west. This shouldn't be a bad thing. He headed for Salt Lake City. He made it there by October of '58. And he writes again to his mother. He says, "You need not expect me home till you see me. But bear in mind that I will do what is right, take care of myself, and try to make a fortune honestly, which I think I can do in a year or 2. By December of '58, after a 3-week surge of mountain fever, He lost his job as a quartermaster. He did not know when he would return home, but he was not going to do so without some money. He was having a rather hard time of it. He asked his mother, "Mother, do not grieve for me more than possible. Someday I will be worth something." So he went off to Pikes Peak to the gold strike. Sounds like a great time until you realize, whether at the hand of Indians or the elements, 12 of the 19 men of his party died. After 47 days, he connected with a whole $54. In the end of summer of '59, he headed back to Kansas. On the way, Indians stole his horse, shot his traveling companion. He arrived in Lawrence weathered and beaten. And he writes, "Do not lose confidence in me. I expect everybody thinks and talks hard about me, but I cannot help it now. It will all be straight before winter passes." But as you can tell, by fall of '59, he finds himself back again in Stanton, Kansas, teaching school and boarding children. One speaks of sense of guilt by having to leave his mother. Another letter announces abandonment of his hopes for a great future and resignation to a life of hard work and modest achievement. Still, another states that he is tired of roving around without any entanglement or goal in sight, and that such a course must end in nothing. It must change, and it must change before it is too late. Finally, there is an expression of belief that his survival amidst so many hardships and perils means that there must be something else for me to do. Well, there was, but it wasn't pretty. We find that he went on a unique trip. When he got back to Kansas in March, he lived with the Delaware Indians on the reservation of the Kansas River from Lawrence. He would make frequent trips into Lawrence as a detective for the Delawares under the alias Charlie Hart. Now tell me, why do you change your name and then go into another town? Sounds just a little deceptive to me. At this point, we find that I consider the greatest challenge in his approach to life and his behavior. He spent considerable time building relationships with both the Jayhawkers and the Border Ruffians. Those that were anti-slavery and those that were pro-slavery. He served a distinct purpose. He was an instigator, and to those whom he instigated against, he was their savior. Let's say that you have cattle in Missouri, and all of a sudden that cattle is removed. It's in Kansas. Now, you have a couple options. Sell it to someone in Kansas, or get a reward for the Missouri people to find their cattle and then bring them back to them. And this works from both sides of the border. How about doing the same thing with slaves? I steal the slaves in Missouri. I can help you find them. Or I can sell them. I can help you find them. Well, yes, it's worth $50 for me to have my slaves back. Okay? He brings them back. What an operation you got to find this whole double agent world in which he was living. That things weren't going right. And he was putting himself into a position of danger, but he was putting himself in a position where he was making great contacts, but he was also hurting the people that he was working for. Well, along comes the Civil War. Hey, which one of these tactics, which one of these skills that I have learned, firearms, horseback riding, all of these elements of survival, which ones can I put to good use? Quantrill, as a leader of a military organization, the tone from the top sets forth the cultural environment and the corporate values of his organization. The tone was set and will determine the success of those that he led and those that he influenced, perhaps the entire organization. Quantrill established 3 elements of his tone from the top. Revenge, get back at those who treated us poorly. Destruction, don't just disable, destroy. Terror, unless you scare them to death, you will not have them working with you. Because destruction of the enemy was a key tactic in guerrilla attacks, you will notice I did not say the neutralization or the surrender of the enemy. There are certain skill sets that you see on your screen here that went along with training. Confederate mission and ideology and ethics. Now, I'd love to tell you that these were followed by the letter of the law, but hey, after the one big battle in Missouri, uniformed Confederates were not occupying in great numbers. So, since I'm the leader of the Confederate band here, I'll interpret it the way that I want to. How's that? Does that work? Don't you do the same thing at home? If your wife is not there and you have nobody to ask, you do it the way she thinks she would like it? Oh, some of your heads just did not move on that. My goodness, I know you better than that. You're from Missouri. Oh, my. The mission of a guerrilla. Guerrilla mission, obviously different in tactics and techniques from that of the Confederate mission. Horsemanship, firearms. There was an improvement in handguns during the American Civil War that increased their capability. Uniform tactics. Do we wear our uniforms? Do we wear the Union uniforms? Do we not wear uniforms at all? Oh, okay. They do have clothes on, okay? They just have plain clothes on. Intelligence, I know. So you thought I had pictures, didn't you? Okay. Shh. Intelligence gathering. The border war area was fertile ground for the outbreak of guerrilla warfare when the Civil War erupted in '61. For over 6 years, since 1854, its prairies had been the stage for the almost incessant series of political conventions, raids, massacres, pitched battles, and atrocities, and all parts of a fierce conflict between the Free State and the pro-slavery, and had come to Kansas to settle and to battle. Guerrilla warfare erupted throughout the state and intensified in August of '61 after the Union defeat at the Battle of Wilson's Creek. Unlike other border areas in Missouri and Kentucky, bushwhacking, sniping, and guerrilla fighting marked this period in Missouri history. When the regular troops were absent, the improvised war often assumed deadly guerrilla nature. By August of '62, with the Union victory at the Battle of Pea Ridge, Missouri, was free of significant regular Confederate troops. But the insurgent violence continued. The most notorious force was that of William Quantrill. Quantrill was not the only Confederate guerrilla operating in Missouri, but he gained rapidly a notoriety. He and his men ambushed Union patrols, supply convoys, seized the mail, and occasionally struck towns on both sides of the border, reflecting the evil nature of the guerrilla conflict in Missouri. Quantrill directed much of his effort against pro-Union civilians by attempting to drive them from the territory that he operated. Quantrill's guerrillas attacked Jayhawkers, Missouri State Militia, and Union troops, and relied primarily on ambush and raids. Under Quantrill's direction, the Confederate guerrillas perfected military tactics such as disguises, coordinated and synchronized attacks, planned dispersal after attack, and used pre-planned routes and relays of forces. The technical methods, such as the use of multiple .36 caliber Colt revolvers for increased firepower and their improved accuracy over the .44 caliber. To demonstrate the guerrillas' approach to the mission, I only mention for you 4 battles. On August 11th of '62, the first Battle of Independence, Colonel John Hughes' Confederate force, including the partisan leader William Quantrill, attacked Independence before dawn, delivering a deadly volley to sleeping men. After the battle, Union leader surrendered, and about 150 of his men were paroled. The remainder had escaped, hidden, or been killed. Confederate guerrilla George Todd freed the prisoners in the jail. Todd also captured Captain Aaron Thomas of the 2nd Battalion of Missouri State Militia Cavalry. A man also, named as Knowles, had guided Thomas's force to a successful ambush of Todd's command at an earlier engagement and killed several of Todd's folks. Todd and his men summarily executed Knowles and Todd. Union casualties, 344, 150 paroled, 2 executed. In August 15th of '62, William Quantrill was starting to get some notice. He was granted a field commission as a captain in the Confederate Army under the Confederate Partisan Ranger Act. Other officers were elected by the men. Quantrill often referred to himself as Colonel. Despite the legal responsibilities assumed by the Confederate government, Quantrill often acted from here forward on his own with little concern and little following of policy. Olathe, September 7th. Just after midnight, Quantrill's band of 140 men attacked Olathe. The raiders killed 6 or 7 men and held Olathe residents in the public square while they looted all of their homes. But of course, the grand attack, the Lawrence Massacre. How many of you have been to Lawrence? As Missourians, you need to. It's a great place. Well, it was for me. I did part of my dissertation on the top of Mount Horrid, where the historical library sits of the University of Kansas. So it was a great place for me. At that time, 150 years later. Lawrence was a historic operation for abolitionists, jayhawkers. The region was known as Bleeding Kansas in the press. The attack was the product of careful planning. Quantrill had gained confidence of many of the leaders of independent bushwhacker groups and chose a day and a time of attack well in advance. Different Missouri riders approached Lawrence from the east in several independent columns. They converged with well-timed precision in the final miles before Lawrence during the pre-dawn hours of the chosen day. Many of the men had been riding for over 24 hours and to make the rendezvous, they lashed themselves to their saddles to keep them riding in case they fell asleep. Almost all were armed with multiple six-shot revolvers. Around 450 guerrillas arrived on the outskirts of Lawrence shortly after 5 a.m. A small squad was dispatched to the summit of Mount Horrid to serve as lookouts, and the remainder rode into town. One of the first deaths was Samuel Snyder, who was outside milking his cows as they rode by. The initial focus was Eldridge Hotel, because that would be where the headquarters of Quantrill would sit during the rest of the raid, and where orders would be dispatched from. Once they took it, the troops went out to grab the rest of the city. The raid was less of a battle and more of a mass execution. 2 weeks before the attack, the Lawrence newspaper had boasted, "Lawrence is ready for any emergency. Over 500 fighting men, every one of them would like to see Quantrill's raiders come here." Well, if that wasn't a la-di-da to Quantrill, what was even worse was those troops had been called away from Lawrence. And in fact, even before that, there had been what was called the sacking of Lawrence, where a pro-slavery attackers, a sheriff from Douglas County, demanded that the citizens of Lawrence give up their guns, their firearms to the raiders. But by the end of the sacking, many of the Lawrence were left without weapons. So not a lot of weapons, not a lot of Union troops, and here comes 450 guerrillas riding right down on them. While many of the victims had been specifically targeted beforehand, executions were more indiscriminate among the areas of Todd's band and those of Bloody Bill Anderson. Numbers seemed disproportionate. The raid devolved into extreme brutality. According to witnesses, the raiders murdered a group of men and their sons who had surrendered under assurances of safety. Murdered a father who was in a field with his son. Shot a defenseless man lying sick in bed. Killed an injured man who had been held by his pleading wife. And bound a pair of men and forced them into a burning building where they slowly burned to death. Total casualties, 164 men and boys, and 1/4 of the town gone. October 6th, Baxter Springs. Quantrill's raiders were traveling south through Kansas along the Texas road to the winter in Texas, numbering about 400. The team captured and killed 2 Union Teamsters who had come from the Federal Army post known at that time as Fort Blair. The raiders assaulted the fort, but were turned away, evidently retreating to the prairie, where they encountered Union detachment escorting Major James Blunt, who was moving his command headquarters south from Fort Scott to Fort Smith, Arkansas. Wearing federal uniforms, thereby taking soldiers by surprise, Quantrill's column rode right up on them, said hello, and promptly dispatched them. Total Union casualties, 103 soldiers killed, 18 wounded, and 10 civilians killed. Any of those tactics that you heard there, what you've seen develop before in his career? Well, hey, look here. Here is a fine group of Missourians. On the screen, you have two fine families. On the left, Jesse and Frank James, and on the right, Bob, Jim, Cole Younger, and their sister Henrietta. Now, some of you look like you're about my age. I won't point you out. You either have gray or no hair, so it looks a little bit like this. I remember a song growing up by John Mellencamp, a little ditty that said, it's a little ditty about Jack and Diane, two American kids growing up in the heartland. Well, here you go. A little ditty about the James and the Youngers, 5 American kids growing up in the heartland. Oh yeah, life goes on, long after the thrill of living is gone. The environment of being 16 years of age, however, was quite different, than that of Jack and Diane, whose biggest challenge was the chili dog at the tasting breeze. Jesse and Frank belonged to families from the area known as Little Dixie in western Missouri, with strong ties to the South. At the age of 16, Jesse was beaten and whipped by Union militia during a raid on his family farm. And they were looking for Frank, who was serving at Quantrill at the time. At the same visit, Jesse's stepfather was repeatedly hanged, but not killed, while being questioned. After the war, Pinkerton agents raided the James household again. Detectives threw an incendiary device into the house, exploded, killing James' young half-brother, Archie, 9.5 years old, blew off the arm of Zerelda Samuels, and the intent was clearly to burn down the home and deal with the occupants as they exited the burning building. So, I can't tell you that they had I'll tell you that they could have had good reason to be upset, yes? Yeah. How about the James, or the Youngers there? Cole, James, John, and Robert. Now, if you were to see this picture in a newspaper back in the Civil War era, they would look like an accounting firm, wouldn't they? They were dressed to the hilt. Many children of the prosperous Henry Younger were quite well educated and lived a good life until the time of major strife began on the Kansas-Missouri border. While it sounds contradictory, their father was a Union sympathizer, believing that the Union should be preserved and that slavery should be abolished, despite the fact that he owned a couple of slaves. His beliefs, however, would not stop raids on his farm by jayhawkers. During these raids, his stock and his wagons were stolen and his property destroyed. These actions began to turn his sons against the Union and, most importantly, against the jayhawkers. After watching the violence for years, Cole went against his father's belief and sided with the Confederates and became a guerrilla under Quantrill. When his father was killed by a detachment of Union militiamen in July of '62, Cole's anger was fired even further against the Union and the Kansas Jayhawkers. 2 years later, in '64, Cole's brother James joined the Quantrill band. In '65, James had been captured by Union troops and was sent to Alton Prison until the end of the war. Cole and James returned to the family farm to find it in ruins and no longer profitable. Although John and Bob had done their best to maintain it, the ravages of war took their toll. Prior to the Lawrence massacre, authorities began imprisoning members of known guerrilla families with the intent of banishing them. The females, some young teenagers, were jailed in Kansas City in makeshift jails. The Union soldiers had to enlarge the space, so they removed on the first floor the supporting beams. As a result, the structure collapsed, maiming, killing several women that were family members of Quantrill's troops. Their origins under Quantrill that participated in the bitter partisan fighting that racked Missouri and Kansas during the American Civil War. After the war, men continued to plunder and murder. Through the motive shifted from personal to profit, from anger to resolution, or it was merely an extension of the war. Together in small groups, the Youngers and the James, for 10 years, were the most feared, most publicized, and most wanted Confederate outlaws in the American frontier. Although their crimes were reckless and brutal, many members of the gang commanded notoriety in the public eye and earned the gang's significant popular support and sympathy. Over the decade, they were suspected in participating in minimally 12 bank robberies, 7 train robberies, 4 stagecoach robberies, leaving behind at least 12 dead citizens and officials in 11 states. So, my friends, it's time for your thoughts. Did Quantrill's pedagogical skill set propel his subordinates he trained into a deviant career? If they did, in part or in whole. Ladies and gentlemen, you all have been just a terrific group. I appreciate the conversation around. And if you want to leave your sheets with us, please do. If you want to take them home, please do. Thank you so much, and you all have a great day.